The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council building glowed with soft blue light as delegates from 47 different worlds gathered for what most considered a boring afternoon session. Ambassador Trell scratched his scaled chin and yawned loudly as he flipped through the agenda on his datapad. Item number 47 caught his attention and made him chuckle. "Ban the humans from Federation membership," he read aloud to his aide. "What a waste of time. Do we really need to formally reject these primitives?" His aide, a young Corvan diplomat named Brix, nodded eagerly. "The paperwork has been sitting in the archives for 30 years. The bureaucrats want to clear their backlog before the next fiscal cycle." Trell laughed again. Humans were a joke among the diplomatic community. Their planet Earth was barely out of its Stone Age compared to galactic standards. They still used chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. Most species had abandoned such crude technology thousands of years ago when they first learned to split atoms properly. Chancellor Vorth called the session to order with her musical voice that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The elegant blue-skinned leader of the Altarian Republic had held the position for over 2 centuries and ran the council meetings with efficient precision. "Item 47, she announced. "The formal rejection of species designation Human Terra Sol 3 for Federation membership. Ambassador Trell will present the case." Trell stood and activated the holographic display. Images of Earth appeared showing cities covered in smog, wars raging across continents, and primitive spacecraft struggling to reach their own moon. The assembled delegates murmured with amusement and disgust. "Honored colleagues," Trell began, "these humans are clearly unsuitable for civilized galactic society. They wage constant war among themselves over resources that are abundant elsewhere in the galaxy. They poison their own atmosphere and destroy their natural environment for short-term profit. Their technology is so primitive that they still burn fossil fuels for energy." The display showed more images of human conflicts, environmental destruction, and what the galaxy considered laughably outdated technology. Several delegates openly laughed at footage of human soldiers using gunpowder weapons and metal projectiles. "Furthermore," Trell continued, "their social structure is chaotic and unstable. They have no unified planetary government. Instead, they divide themselves into hundreds of competing nations that constantly threaten each other with weapons of mass destruction. How can we trust such a species with the responsibilities of Federation membership?" Delegate Corvash of the Centauri Alliance raised a tentacle. "What about their application? Have they demonstrated any worthwhile capabilities?" Trell waved dismissively. "They sent a small diplomatic team to our border station 3 decades ago. The humans presented gifts of crude art and samples of their primitive music. They spoke of peace and cooperation, but their own planet tells a different story. Actions speak louder than words, and their actions show they are violent, destructive, and technologically backward." The Xanthari representative, a crystalline being that communicated through light patterns, flashed a question. "Are they at least useful as a labor force?" "Hardly," Trell replied. "They are physically weak compared to most species. Their lifespan is incredibly short. They require specific atmospheric conditions and temperature ranges that make them unsuitable for most industrial applications. They offer us nothing of value." Chancellor Vorth reviewed her notes. "The humans have been petitioning for membership for 43 years. Their diplomatic team has been consistently polite and persistent. They have not violated any border agreements or caused any incidents." "Which proves they are too weak to be a threat," Trell countered. "We need allies who can contribute to our collective strength and prosperity. The humans would be a burden, not a benefit." The debate that followed was brief and largely one-sided. Most delegates agreed that humans were too primitive and violent to join the Federation. The few who suggested giving them more time were quickly outvoted by those who saw the rejection as a simple administrative task. The Aldorian representative, Dr. Yenth, raised a concern. "Should we not study them further? Sometimes primitive species develop rapidly when exposed to advanced technology." Trell shook his head. That would be dangerous. Giving advanced technology to a violent species could threaten galactic stability. It is better to keep them isolated until they mature naturally, if they ever do. The vote was called, and the result was overwhelming. 45 votes in favor of the ban, 2 abstentions from species that rarely participated in such decisions. Not a single delegate voted against the measure. The motion passes, Chancellor Vorth announced. Species designation Human Terrasol 3 is hereby banned from Federation membership. The diplomatic team will be notified through proper channels. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, most had already forgotten about the humans. It was just another routine administrative task completed. The galaxy was vast and full of interesting species. Why waste time on backward primitives who still fought with chemical explosives? On the border station where the human diplomatic team had waited hopefully for news, Ambassador David Wright received the official message with quiet dignity. His small team of 12 diplomats had spent decades building relationships and learning galactic customs. They had studied hundreds of alien languages and cultures, always believing that patience and understanding would eventually win them acceptance. "What do we do now?" asked Dr. Jennifer Nash, the team's cultural specialist. Wright stared out at the stars through the station's observation window. "We go home and tell Earth what happened. Then we decide what kind of future we want to build." The human delegation packed their belongings and prepared to return to Earth. They had no way of knowing that their rejection would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of the Galactic Federation. The council members who had dismissed them so casually would eventually learn that underestimating humans was the greatest mistake in galactic history. As their small ship disappeared into hyperspace, the galaxy continued its business as usual, completely unaware that they had just made enemies of the most dangerous species they had ever encountered. 5 years had passed since the ban, and the galaxy had forgotten about humans entirely. The Federation continued its expansion, trade flowed between member worlds, and the great machinery of galactic civilization hummed along smoothly. Nobody paid attention to the small ships that began appearing in the shadowy corners of space, where pirates and smugglers conducted their business. Roy Hassan wiped grease from his hands as he finished repairing the cargo bay door of his ship, the Wanderer. The vessel looked like junk from the outside, which was exactly how Roy wanted it. Beneath the rusted hull and patched armor plating, the ship contained some of the most advanced technology that human ingenuity could create. "Roy, we have a problem," called Maria Santos from the bridge. She was his first officer and one of the few people in the galaxy he trusted completely. "The Xanthari mining colony is broadcasting a distress signal. Some kind of plague outbreak." Roy climbed up to the bridge and studied the incoming message. The Xanthari were crystalline beings who mined rare minerals in the asteroid belt of their home system. They were not Federation members, which made them invisible to official help when disasters struck. "What about Federation response?" Roy asked. Maria checked her instruments. "The nearest Federation medical ship is 6 weeks away. By then, the entire colony will be dead," Roy nodded grimly. This was exactly the kind of situation that had become routine for him and his crew. The Federation's bureaucracy was excellent at maintaining order among its member worlds, but terrible at responding to emergencies in the vast spaces between civilized systems. "Set course for the mining colony," Roy ordered. "Send a message to Dr. Rivera and tell him to prepare the medical bay." The Wanderer jumped to hyperspace with a rumble that shook the deck plates. Human ships were not as elegant as Federation vessels, but they were fast and reliable. More importantly, they were operated by crews who could make decisions quickly without waiting for authorization from distant bureaucrats. Dr. Alex Rivera was waiting in the medical bay when they arrived. At the mining colony, he had been a Federation observer before the ban, one of the few aliens who had actually lived among humans and understood their capabilities. When the diplomatic team was expelled, Rivera had chosen to stay with them rather than return to his own people. "The plague is bacterial," Rivera reported as they docked with the mining station. "It attacks their crystalline matrix and causes structural breakdown. I have synthesized a treatment using human medical techniques, but I need to test it first. Roy watched through the airlock window as Rivera entered the infected colony wearing a full environmental suit. The Xanthari miners were desperate enough to accept help from anyone, even the banned humans they had barely heard of. The treatment worked. Within hours, the infected miners began to recover. Within days, the plague was completely eliminated. The Xanthari colony leader, a tall crystal being named Thresh, met with Roy personally to express his gratitude. The Federation told us that humans were primitive and violent, Thresh said, his voice creating musical tones. But you saved us when they would not even respond to our distress calls, Roy smiled. The Federation sees only what they want to see. They judge us by our past, not our potential. This was not the first time Roy and his crew had helped people that the Federation ignored. Over the past 5 years, human ships had appeared wherever there was trouble in the galaxy's dark corners. They delivered medical supplies to plague victims, rescued miners from collapsed asteroids, and provided protection to traders traveling dangerous routes. The humans operated in the shadows, building a network of contacts and allies among the galaxy's outcasts and forgotten peoples. They asked for nothing in return except information and the occasional favor. Slowly, they were mapping the galaxy's hidden truths. The corruption runs deeper than we thought, Rivera told Roy during their weekly briefing. The Corvan Empire has been using Federation law to legitimize their expansion into non-member territories. They are essentially stealing entire worlds and calling it legal colonization. Roy studied the data that Rivera had collected. The evidence was disturbing but not surprising. The Federation's noble ideals looked very different when viewed from the bottom of the galactic hierarchy. The mining rights scandal on Kepler 438b is just the beginning, Rivera continued. 3 Federation counselors are involved in illegal resource extraction. They are using their political influence to suppress investigations and eliminate witnesses. Maria looked up from her navigation console. Speaking of witnesses, we have another mission. The Aldorian Research Station is requesting discreet medical assistance. Apparently, one of their scientists has been asking uncomfortable questions about Federation activities. Roy nodded. The Aldorians were one of the few species that had abstained from the human ban vote. They were scientists and philosophers who valued knowledge above politics. If they were requesting help, it meant they had discovered something important. Set course for the Aldorian station, Roy ordered, and send a message to the other ships in our network. I have a feeling this is going to be bigger than a simple medical emergency. The Wanderer jumped to hyperspace again, heading toward what would become the most important mission of their outlaw careers. Behind them, the Xanthari mining colony continued its operations. But now the miners spoke of the mysterious humans who had saved them when no one else would help. Word was spreading throughout the galaxy's underground networks. Humans were not the primitive savages that the Federation claimed they were. They were something far more dangerous to the established order. They were competent, resourceful, and completely unwilling to accept the galaxy's rules about who mattered and who could be ignored. The Federation had created their own worst nightmare by banning the humans. Instead of keeping them safely isolated on their primitive world, they had forced them to learn the galaxy's darkest secrets. Now those secrets were being carefully documented and shared among a growing network of species that had been overlooked or exploited by the galactic establishment. The real war was just beginning. The Aldorian Research Station hung in the void like a delicate flower made of metal and crystal. Dr. Yenth, the same Aldorian who had questioned the human ban years earlier, floated in the station's zero-gravity medical bay with severe injuries that his own people could not treat. His crystalline body had been shattered by what appeared to be a deliberate attack. Dr. Rivera worked carefully to stabilize the injured scientist while Roy and Maria secured the station's perimeter. The Aldorians were peaceful by nature, but someone had clearly wanted to silence Dr. Yenth permanently. He keeps repeating the same phrase, Rivera reported through the CUM system. Something about the archive and the truth that could destroy them all. Roy felt his pulse quicken. Intelligence networks throughout the galaxy had whispered about the archive for decades. It was supposedly a massive database of historical records that had been hidden away during the last Galactic War. Most people believed it was just a legend, but the Aldorians were serious scholars who did not waste time on fairy tales. "Can you get him conscious enough to talk?" Roy asked. Rivera adjusted his medical instruments. "I can try, but his injuries are severe. Someone used a neural disruptor on him. That kind of weapon is only available to Federation security forces." The implication was clear. Dr. Yenth had discovered something important enough that the Federation was willing to commit murder to keep it secret. Roy had seen enough corruption over the past 5 years to know that the galactic government was not the noble institution it claimed to be. But attempted murder of a respected scientist was a new level of criminality. Dr. Yenth's eyes flickered open and focused on Rivera with difficulty. "The archive," he whispered. "It still exists. Hidden in the old survey station at coordinates 7-7-Alpha-9-9. Rivera leaned closer. "What did you find in the archive?" "Everything," Yenth replied weakly. "The real history of the Federation, the wars they started, the species they destroyed, the cover-ups that go back centuries. It is all there, encrypted in the deep storage systems." Roy felt his blood run cold. If the archive contained proof of systematic Federation crimes, it would explain why they were so desperate to keep it secret. It would also explain why they had been so quick to ban humans from membership. A species with Earth's history of exposing corruption would be their worst nightmare. "Where exactly is this station?" Roy asked. Yenth struggled to speak. "The neutral zone, Sector 7-7-Alpha-9-9. But it is protected by automated defenses. The Federation classified it as a hazardous area decades ago to keep people away." Maria checked her star charts. "That sector is marked as containing unstable quantum phenomena. No one goes there." "Perfect cover," Roy muttered. "Hide the evidence in plain sight by making it too dangerous to investigate." Dr. Yenth grabbed Rivera's arm with surprising strength. "You must get the data. The galaxy deserves to know the truth about what the Federation has done. The species they have destroyed, the wars they have started for profit." Rivera nodded solemnly. "We will do everything we can." Yenth's eyes closed again as the medical drugs took effect. Rivera worked for several more hours to stabilize his condition, but it was clear that the scientist would need weeks of recovery. The neural disruptor had caused permanent damage to his memory centers. Roy called a meeting with his senior crew in the station's conference room. The Wanderer was a capable ship, but infiltrating a heavily defended installation in the neutral zone would require careful planning and possibly additional resources. "We need to contact the network," Maria said. "This is too big for one ship to handle," Roy agreed. Over the past 5 years, dozens of human ships had joined their unofficial fleet. Some were former military vessels that had been converted to civilian use. Others were merchant ships that had been modified for special operations. All of them were crewed by humans who had been radicalized by their species. Treatment at the hands of the Federation. The response to Roy's message was immediate and overwhelming. Admiral Beth Cooper, who had been building a shadow fleet of human vessels, offered to provide tactical support. Tom Bradley, a former intelligence operative who now ran information networks throughout the galaxy, volunteered to provide updated intelligence on the target location. Within 48 hours, a small fleet of human ships had assembled at the edge of the neutral zone. They looked like typical cargo vessels and scientific survey ships, but their hidden modifications made them capable of military operations that would surprise the Federation forces. The automated defenses around the archive station were impressive but predictable. The Federation had built them using standard military protocols that human tacticians had studied extensively. More importantly, the defenses were designed to stop large military fleets, not small teams of infiltrators. Roy led a boarding party of 12 specialists through the defense grid using techniques that the Federation had never encountered. While galactic military doctrine emphasized massive firepower and overwhelming force, humans had learned to succeed through stealth improvisation. and pure stubbornness. The archive station was a marvel of ancient technology. Its data storage systems were built using quantum crystalline matrices that could hold virtually unlimited information. The main computer core was larger than most space stations and contained the accumulated knowledge of hundreds of civilizations. Tom Bradley worked with the station's computer systems while Roy and Maria secured the perimeter. The encryption protecting the archive was incredibly sophisticated, but human computer specialists had developed techniques that the original programmers had never anticipated. I am reading data streams that go back over 1,000 years, Bradley reported. Military operations, diplomatic communications, financial records, everything. The Federation has been systematically documenting their own crimes. Roy studied the information flowing across the display screens. The scope of the corruption was staggering. The Federation had not simply made mistakes or acted carelessly. They had deliberately planned and executed campaigns of conquest, genocide, and exploitation that spanned centuries. Look at this, Maria called from another terminal. Records of the Corvan expansion into the Orion Arm. They were not colonizing empty systems. They were destroying existing civilizations and then claiming the worlds were uninhabited. Bradley highlighted another section of data. Financial records showing massive theft from member worlds. The Federation has been systematically looting the resources of smaller species while claiming to protect them. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. The Federation was not a noble alliance of civilized species working together for mutual benefit. It was a criminal organization that used diplomatic language and legal procedures to hide systematic exploitation and murder. Roy felt a grim satisfaction as he watched the data download to their secure storage systems. The Federation had banned humans because they were afraid of what a determined species might discover about their crimes. Now they were about to learn that their fears had been completely justified. The archive contained everything they needed to expose the corruption that had rotted the heart of galactic civilization. But getting the evidence was only the first step. Now they had to figure out how to present it to the galaxy in a way that could not be ignored or suppressed. The real challenge was just beginning. The underground network had grown beyond anyone's expectations. What started as a small group of human smugglers had evolved into a galaxy-spanning intelligence organization that operated in the shadows of Federation space. Ships bearing human crews appeared wherever there was trouble, offering aid to the forgotten and documenting the crimes of the powerful. Admiral Beth Cooper stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Defiant, reviewing reports from dozens of human vessels scattered across the galaxy. Her ship was officially registered as a civilian transport, but beneath its innocent exterior lay the most advanced weapons and sensor systems that human engineering could create. The mining colony in the Vega system is reporting another Federation taxation visit, reported Commander Lisa Wong, Cooper's intelligence officer. They are demanding 80% of the colony's rare earth production in exchange for continued protection. Cooper nodded grimly. The pattern was always the same. The Federation would offer protection to vulnerable colonies, then gradually increase their demands until the colonists were essentially slaves working for the benefit of corrupt officials. Send the rescue team, Cooper ordered. Make sure they document everything. We need evidence of the extortion for the archive. The archive had become the central focus of human activities in the galaxy. Every piece of evidence they collected was carefully cataloged and cross-referenced with the historical data they had recovered from the ancient station. The picture that emerged was one of systematic corruption that went back centuries. Tom Bradley had established a network of information brokers throughout the galaxy who fed intelligence to the human fleet. Most of them were members of species that had been exploited by the Federation and were eager to see the corrupt system exposed. We have confirmation of the genocide on Kepler 442b, Bradley reported during the weekly intelligence briefing. The Corvan Empire destroyed the native population 20 years ago and then claimed the planet was uninhabited when they filed their colonization papers. Cooper felt sick as she reviewed the evidence. The native species of Kepler 442b had been peaceful farmers who had posed no threat to anyone. The Corvins had exterminated them simply because they wanted the planet's agricultural resources. How many Federation officials were involved in the cover-up? Cooper asked. At least 12, Bradley replied, including 3 current council members. They falsified the survey reports and destroyed the original population records. The evidence was mounting steadily, but Cooper knew that documentation alone would not be enough. The Federation's propaganda machine was powerful enough to dismiss even the most damning evidence as terrorist lies and alien conspiracy theories. We need to hit them where they cannot ignore us, Cooper told her senior staff. The annual Grand Assembly is in 3 months. Every member species will be represented. If we can present the evidence there, in front of the entire galaxy, they will not be able to suppress it. The Grand Assembly was the Federation's most important political event. For 1 week every year, delegates from all member worlds gathered to debate policy and renew their commitment to galactic unity. The security around the event was legendary, but Cooper had been studying the problem for months. The communication systems are vulnerable, reported Chief Engineer David Park. Old delegate transmissions are routed through the central hub for translation and distribution. If we can access that hub, we can broadcast to every screen in the assembly hall. Cooper smiled grimly. The Federation's own efficiency would be their downfall. Their centralized communication system was designed to ensure that every delegate received the same information simultaneously. That same system could be used to show them truths that the leadership desperately wanted to hide. The plan that emerged from weeks of careful preparation was audacious even by human standards. A small team of infiltrators would penetrate the assembly's security during the opening ceremony and take control of the communication hub. They would then broadcast the archive's contents to every delegate simultaneously, making it impossible for the Federation leadership to suppress the evidence. Roy Hassan volunteered to lead the infiltration team. His experience with smuggling operations had taught him how to move unseen through even the most secure facilities. More importantly, he had personal reasons for wanting to confront the Federation leadership directly. The security protocols are designed to stop large-scale military attacks, Roy explained to the team during their final briefing. They are not prepared for small teams using unconventional tactics. The infiltration began 3 days before the assembly opened. Roy's team used stolen credentials and forged documents to gain access to the massive conference facility. They posed as maintenance workers, diplomatic aides, and technical specialists, while slowly positioning themselves for the main operation. The opening ceremony was a spectacular display of galactic unity. Chancellor Vorth delivered a speech about peace and cooperation while delegates from 47 worlds listened politely. The massive viewing screens showed images of prosperous Federation worlds and happy alien families living in harmony. Roy's team struck during the height of the ceremony. While security forces focused on protecting the delegates, the humans slipped into the communication hub and began their work. The Federation's own technology made their job easier, as the centralized systems were designed for efficiency rather than security. The first signs of trouble came when the viewing screens flickered and went dark. Chancellor Vorth paused in her speech, looking puzzled. Then the screens came back online, but instead of showing Federation propaganda, they displayed the archive's evidence. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Delegates who had been sitting politely suddenly leaped to their feet as they saw proof of crimes committed against their own species. The Xanthari representative began flashing angry light patterns as she saw evidence of illegal mining operations on her homeworld. The Aldorian delegation huddled together in shock as they learned about the destruction of their research colonies. "This is what your Federation really is?" Roy's voice echoed through the assembly hall. "These are the crimes that have been committed in your name. The genocide, the theft, the systematic exploitation of innocent species." The evidence continued to flow across the screens. Financial records showing massive corruption, military communications revealing planned attacks on civilian targets, and diplomatic cables that exposed the cynical manipulation of smaller species. Chancellor Vorth tried to restore order, but the assembly had erupted in chaos. Species that had been allies for centuries were now confronting each other with evidence of betrayal and exploitation. The Corvan delegation attempted to flee, but found their way blocked by security forces from species they had been secretly oppressing. "You banned us because you were afraid of what we might discover," Roy continued. "You were right to be afraid. We have spent 5 years documenting your crimes and building evidence of your corruption. Now the galaxy knows the truth." The broadcast continued for over an hour, revealing layer after layer of systematic criminality. When it finally ended, the Grand Assembly was in complete chaos. Delegates were screaming accusations at each other, security forces were struggling to maintain order, and the Federation government was collapsing in real time. The revolution had begun, and there was no stopping it now. The Federation collapsed faster than anyone had predicted. Within hours of the broadcast, emergency sessions were being called on dozens of worlds as species. Leaders struggled to process the evidence of systematic betrayal, the communication. Networks that had once carried official Federation propaganda now buzzed with angry demands for justice and accountability. Chancellor Vorth stood in her private office, watching through the windows as riots erupted in the streets of the capital city. The elegant blue-skinned leader who had once commanded the respect of the galaxy now faced the complete destruction of everything she had worked to build. "The Xanthari have withdrawn from the Federation," reported her aide, a nervous young official, whose hands trembled as he read the latest dispatches. "So have the Aldorians, the Rigelians, and the Tauseti Alliance. We are losing entire sectors every hour." Vorth closed her eyes and tried to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. The Federation had maintained stability for over 3 centuries by carefully managing information and controlling the narrative. Now that control was completely gone, and the truth was spreading faster than they could contain it. "What about the Kovan Empire?" she asked. "In full revolt," the aide replied. "Their subject species have risen up simultaneously. The Corvan military is fighting civil wars on 17 different worlds. Ambassador Trell has been arrested by his own security forces." Vorth felt a bitter irony in that news. Trell had been the primary advocate for banning the humans, claiming they were too primitive and violent to be trusted with galactic citizenship. Now his own empire was tearing itself apart because of what those same humans had revealed on the other side of the galaxy. Roy Hassan sat in the command center of a captured Federation intelligence station, coordinating the activities of human ships that were now operating openly throughout civilized space. The Shadow Fleet had emerged from the darkness and was working to maintain order as the old government collapsed. "Status report," Roy called to his communications officer. 12 species have formally requested human assistance in establishing new governments, Maria Santos reported. "The Xanthari want us to help them form a mining cooperative. The Aldorians are asking for help in rebuilding their research colonies. Even some of the former Federation core worlds are requesting aid." Roy smiled grimly. The same species that had voted to ban humans from the galaxy were now begging for human help to clean up the mess that their own government had created. The irony was not lost on him. "What about the Corvan Empire?" Roy asked. "Complete collapse," Tom Bradley reported from his intelligence station. "Their military has fragmented into competing factions. Most of their subject species have declared independence. The few remaining Corvan officials are trying to negotiate surrender terms." The transformation of the galaxy was happening at unprecedented speed. The rigid hierarchies that had maintained order for centuries were dissolving as species after species chose to break free from the corrupt system that had exploited them. Some worlds descended into chaos, but others were already beginning to form new alliances based on mutual respect rather than domination. Admiral Cooper arrived at the intelligence station with a small fleet of human ships and a delegation of alien representatives who had come to negotiate the formation of a new galactic government. The assembled species included many who had once voted to ban humans from the Federation. "We need to establish a new framework for galactic cooperation," Cooper announced to the assembled delegates. The old system was based on hierarchy and exploitation. We need to build something better. The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in galactic history. Instead of being dictated by powerful empires, the new government was designed from the ground up by species that had been marginalized and ignored under the old system. Humans played a central role in the discussions, but as equals rather than conquerors. We propose a confederation based on voluntary membership and mutual aid, Roy explained to the assembled delegates. No species will be forced to join, and every member will have equal voice in decision-making. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Species that had been enemies under the old system were now working together to build something better. The Xanthari offered to share their mining expertise with anyone who needed it. The Aldorians provided scientific knowledge that could benefit everyone. Even former Federation core worlds contributed their administrative experience to help establish the new government. The formal founding ceremony of the Galactic Confederation took place exactly 1 year after the broadcast that had brought down the Federation. Representatives from over 60 species gathered in a space station that had been built specifically for the new government, with design input from every member species. Chancellor Vorth attended the ceremony as a private citizen, having been removed from power by her own people when the full extent of Federation corruption became known. She watched with mixed emotions as the humans who had once been banned from galactic society were now being asked to lead the new government. "We do not want to rule the galaxy," Roy Hassan announced during his speech to the assembled delegates. "We want to serve it." The new confederation will be governed by principles of transparency, accountability, and mutual respect. The applause that greeted his words came from species that had once considered humans too primitive to deserve recognition. The transformation was complete, but it had come at a terrible cost in terms of galactic stability and the lives lost during the transition. Dr. Rivera, now serving as the Confederation's chief medical officer, established new protocols for responding to emergencies throughout the galaxy. The bureaucratic delays that had once condemned entire colonies to death were replaced by rapid response teams that could reach any world within days. The old system failed because it served the interests of the powerful rather than the needs of the people, Rivera explained to a gathering of medical professionals from across the galaxy. "We will not make that mistake again." The Confederation's first major test came when a plague outbreak threatened the former Corvin homeworld. Under the old system, the response would have been delayed by political considerations and bureaucratic procedures. The new government dispatched medical teams immediately, saving millions of lives, including many former enemies. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the dangers of unchecked power and systematic corruption. The species that had once laughed at human primitiveness now looked to human principles of accountability and justice as the foundation for their new society. The ban had been intended to keep dangerous primitives away from civilized space. Instead, it had created exactly the force that the corrupt Federation had feared most, a species that was willing to fight for justice regardless of the personal cost. The humans had not just gained membership in galactic society. They had transformed it into something worthy of the name. The joke was finally over, and the galaxy was better for it.